Welcome to Simulation and Prototyping. The project this week is to look at LadyBug and use environmental input as a way to help us define and modify a mass and maybe even some components based on that. So what we see on the screen now is radiation analysis. This is the light hitting the surface of a massing model. It's taking the context into account. And what we're seeing is the radiation for the entire year. And so this is not just one day, it's throughout the course of the entire year. So it's a kind of average. And what we're going to be able to do is to modify our geometry and have this update mostly real time so that we'll be able to see as we make changes, how will this impact the radiation? And we'll get into it possibly in a subsequent tutorial, but not all radiation it's not radiation all the time is not always a positive thing. And so there are moments when we actually want to be concerned with shading and we want in some places on the building at some times in the year, we want direct sunlight, but other times possibly not. And so what we're going to do is to develop a massing strategy in an existing context. And I'll share the context with those in the class. And I'll show you how to develop this type of simulation based on LadyBug. And so we'll start with building a kind of really simple geometry that we'll be able to manipulate. We'll then do an analysis of that. And we'll be able to play with that and see what results. So this is what we're going for. I think in the end, when we build something now, I'll build something maybe a little simpler, and I'll explain why. But let's take a look at this. So what I'm going to do is start a new Grasshopper file, but I'll keep the existing context here. And this is something that you'll be able to download from Canvas. So what I want to do is to start with a kind of point in the center of this open site and use that as a way, and just kind of approximating the center is fine. And then we have a point there. So let's capture that point, because what I want to do is to be able to move from that point in any number of directions within that site. And we'll look at the implications of that. So we can also hide that point, and now we've got it in Grasshopper. So this time, I think what I'd like to do is to, well, let's use that point that I just made as a base point for building a lofted geometry coming up from that. And so let's look at moving this point in either the X or the Y X or Y direction on this site. And so as we do that, we will do a move. It'll actually be two moves. One move with the X, and then a second move with the Y. We can hide our first point. And I believe, we'll look at this in a second, but I believe that it's going to be minus 70 to plus 70 will give us a pretty good range of that. And so that's still within the bounds of the site. And obviously if the geometry expands from that center point, we'll have enough range. So let me copy that. And you'll also see I want to be very specific about the range of our sliders, because if time permits, I want to introduce an aspect at the end. And so we'll see if that works. I'm also going to copy this move. We'll plug in the point into that, and then we'll make this the Y direction. And so this allows us between these two to be positive or negative and occupy anything along the site. So we'll also hide that first move. So now we have a point in space, or a point on the ground plane. I think as an easy move to just develop a really simple lofted massing, I want to use a polygon curve, and that's under primitives. And so we'll use the polygon. We'll use the point that we have as the center point. We'll define that as a plane, and then we'll use that plane to define our polygon. I'll hide these things as I go. Let's look at a radius, and I don't remember. Let's see, what would be a good radius? Let's try 50 is less than 100. So 100 is way off the site. So between, well, let's come back to that in a second. I want to make this triangular. I'm just going to set that triangle with a panel because it's not something that I want to change. And I think I also want to set the fillet, or set the radius . Okay, we can use 10 for that. Now as we look between these, maybe we're between 50 and 65. It's not a big range, but that till we get some more intelligence built into this, this will have to work for us so that we don't go off the site. You can also see depending on which way it's oriented, that will change slightly. So now we've got a first polygon. Let's take this, and by using a point, we can move our point in space. Remember, it's this point. We can move this in the Z direction. So we'll capture that point. We'll plug it in here. Now let's move up in the Z direction. And I think, let's see what we want to put for this. Maybe 60 is less than 150. See how this looks for the height. $60. There's 150 that puts us kind of mid-range. So maybe we'll go 75 to 180. And we'll end up doing this again. Actually, we'll just make a new slider. Actually, you know what? Let's just copy that, because I think we'll do the same thing again. We'll see how that works. So for now, we've got our new point. Why don't we just copy this geometry down? We can set that new point to be our origin. And then we've got the triangle. And I just want to be able to change the radius between each floor. Again, there's not a big range. Maybe I'll increase the range for the upper level. That looks good. And while we're here, I want to add a rotation. And so the plane will be the same. The angle we should set to degrees. And we're going to rotate the polygon. And maybe let's just set this from -80 is less than +80. And so that's our lowest level. The polygon. Move this down. The plane. Our new plane for the upper level. The polygon will be the new geometry. We can hide that. And now rotate. The last thing I might do is look at, and I haven't used this too often, but the non-uniform scale. We can scale our object. Again, we can use that same plane. And now we could scale in the X and Y direction. And so let's see if that's 0 is less than 1.00. So why don't we make this 0 to 1.50? So we can make it bigger in one direction or smaller. And actually, I don't want to go to 0. I probably want to go to 0.6. So we can go from 0.6 to making it smaller to 1.5, making it larger. Copy this down. Oh, and I should do the same for the Y. But here, non-uniform. The rotate. And we just need to copy this all once more. Copy all of this. And what we want to pull down is our point. So we'll bring that point down to here. And here we have the ability to move that third element up or down independently. And this is based on the second level. And so it's not an absolute value, it's in relationship. So if we move the second number, or the middle level, we can see the upper floor moves with it. But then the third level moves or can move independently. So we have those. Let's just look at the rotation of the top. And then we could also play with a dimension on the top. So let's bring these together, and we'll do the entwine. So we'll bring the first, second, and third shapes together. At this point, we can hide all three of these. And then let's bring this into a loft and see how this looks. So as we loft this, we then have to flatten it. Let's see how this works. So now we've got a kind of twisted element, and this can be located kind of anywhere on the site. It can have a twist to it, and the shape can change. So we've got pretty good level of control between a number of sliders. And it is a lot of sliders. I'm going to save this. Save the grasshopper as well. Okay, so that gives us a nice massing model. We've got some geometry. We have our lofted surface there to begin to look at. So we can start with our analysis. And so maybe I'll just break this tutorial into a couple parts. We'll break here in terms of having that geometry, and then we'll pick up again with starting to work within LadyBug. This is also to say, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, the next portion of the tutorial will deal with LadyBug for a couple of reasons. Having looked at a couple of things, there's a brand new version of LadyBug available, but I would like to use the LadyBug legacy. Just a little more, there's more tutorials and more support for the way that some of those tools, some of those tools have changed, and that can be a little confusing as you're trying to learn these things. So we'll work with LadyBug Legacy. So make sure that you install that. And now's a good chance to do that if you haven't. And let me know if you have any questions about this, but everything that we've done so far are things that we've already done this semester. So we'll break here, we'll pick up.